All right, this is going to be an interesting video because I love Saints Row. I love Saints Row. Saints Row the third is my favorite. The fourth one was good. It was interesting with the whole superpowers and all that. But three was the best for me. Two, I didn't. All right, I'll put it to you this way: I didn't play every game in the Saints Row franchise. I played a little bit of two. I didn't play one at all. But Saints Row the third, I replayed that game over and over and over and over again. And the fourth one was very. It was a different take, but it was cool. It was fun. Then this game came out, and anybody who knows my other reactions when I reacted to this game, the latest one, Saints Row 5 or whatever they call it, the fifth one, y'all know I was having high hopes. I kept a positive attitude and all that, but I'm not gonna lie. In the back of my head, something told me it was going to fail because you can't disrespect. And this goes for not just gaming, but for movies, TV shows, whatever, books, whatever. If you are already a established big company, you can't go on and disrespect your fan base. And from what I saw, that's what it looked like the company was doing. It looked like they were disrespecting the fan base. And it's not just because they wanted to change some things. I know some people was complaining about, this guy could be gay and all that stuff. That personally, that's not the problem for me. As long as you ain't, I always say when it comes to that stuff, woman leading or black or whatever, as long as it makes sense, it don't bother me. Like, I'm a Batman fan. It would be weird to see Batman and Superman in a relationship. That just don't make sense. It has nothing to do about being gay or straight. It just don't make sense. So as long as you don't do stuff like that, then it don't bother me. So that wasn't a problem for me. It was the fact that the direction they was going with this game was, and if my memory serves me correctly, because it's been a while, but didn't they acknowledge that they didn't want to go down the road that the other ones did because it was too much for them or something? Like, I can't remember exact. I gotta look at that video again. Maybe they'll explain it in this video because this video is called "Why Saints Row Failed." But if I remember serves it correctly, they intentionally did not want to do what the old ones did, what made them famous, and that's a problem. When you do that, you have to. It'll be delusional to think you're not going to get pushback on that. The fan base, the hardcore fan base, like I love Saints Row the Third, but it's bigger fans than me. Hardcore are not going to roll with that. Some are going to be like, we'll see how it looks. And to a lot of the fans' credit, they did. They waited. A lot was going against them, but it was like, we'll see. Maybe this changes for the good. And then it was terrible. I mean, dialogue, story, comedy was stale. It was like they was playing a safe comedy route. And when you go Saints Row or Grand Theft Auto or something like that, South Park, there's just the word safe don't exist. You know what I'm saying? It is what it is. If you want to make it safe and change the route for it, then I hope the best for you. I don't know if the company's going to do as well. But Saints Row, like games like that, they're not known for being safe. And when you're trying to do that and cover your checklist off, pushing whatever agenda it is, I don't want to go into that because I don't know what their agenda was. But outside of them trying to deviate from what made Saints Row big, it's more than likely it's bound to fail. It is bound to fail, unless your changes is somewhat. Like, your changes have to be out of this world fantastic for fans who've been fans of this game. How long has Saints Row been out? Since the 360 era, right? Or early in the 360 era, or was it even before then? But when you have a fan base that extends that long, if you're going to change some things, you better do it right. And unfortunately for them, they didn't do it right to the fact where their company, I think, shut down, didn't it? Or it's on pause or something. I'm about to find out. It's been a minute since this game came out. But I bumped into this, and I'm like, you know what? I'm interested in knowing more information of why this game failed, because even though I see my view of why they failed, there's probably more to it. So let's go ahead and get into this. Why Saints Row failed. This is going to be interesting. And what's your favorite Saints Row game?
The Saints Row series went from being one of the only franchises that could compete with Grand Theft Auto to literally killing its parent company. What went wrong, and how did one developer lose nearly everything due to one failed game? Well, the story begins in the early 2000s when there was only one open world game that dominated the entire gaming landscape. And of course, it was Grand Theft Auto. The series seemed completely untouchable.
Still doing
until
numbers.
Two young companies worked together to introduce a worthy rival known as Saints Row. The first Saints Row game was developed by Volition and published by THQ way back in 2006. The game was a bit buggy and unpolished, but it was embraced by critics and players alike. It was brimming with personality and scratched a unique itch that gamers didn't even know they had. Volition was incredibly smart about how they tried to create a competitor to GTA. They knew that they couldn't beat Rockstar at their own game, and if they tried to publish a typical gritty shooter set in the city, their project would be dismissed as a knockoff. The only way to compete with Grand Theft Auto was to bring something new to the table. For Saints Row, it was the fact that the game didn't take itself too seriously.
No, not at all.
Grand Theft Auto was about
it was a comical version of Grand Theft.
Fun. And this starts with the characters, who were
and that's what I was saying earlier. That's what I was trying to say earlier, was when you mess up what made it big, the comedy was stale in that last one. When the fun was taken out for whatever it is they wanted to put in there, their version of fun, is going to mess up the game. That is what Saints Row, that's what he said himself, that's what made it stick out, was it was fun. It didn't take itself seriously. And in my opinion, for the most part, the comedy landed. You know, so yeah.
Stereotypes of gangsters, with banter that was packed with fun, not so serious one-liners. The story follows your character as you helped your fellow gang members take down rivals in the city of Stillwater. And while this first installment was much more serious than its successors, it still found a unique voice when compared to GTA. The writing was balanced, keeping the tone light while also allowing one to genuinely fall in love with the main protagonists. There were some deeper themes mixed in, with missions where you have to ragdoll your character into traffic to collect insurance money. It was the perfect balance, and the quirkiness of the game was held up by legitimately solid and engaging gunplay centered on the story's escalating.
Yeah, I enjoyed the gunplay.
Saints Row's combination of fun gameplay and unique humor quickly earned the young franchise a healthy fan base.
And I loved the roster of Saints Row the Third. Every character, everyone, even the side characters, I enjoyed in different ways. They really stuck out in my opinion. I was so glad I ever gave Saints Row a shot when I played Saints Row the Third, because, yeah, literally, every character, I'm thinking of Saints Row the Third, every character, even your own, stuck out in a great way. It wasn't cringy. It wasn't, oh, this guy's getting on my nerves and all that stuff, which a lot of the latest Saints Row had. It worked. And that's why I said with Saints Row, the last one, when none of their characters are likable, they're talking about stuff you don't care about. They're trying to be funny in the safest way, which I said it before. With a game like this, that's hard to do. You know, yeah, they get Saints Row the Third. Shout out to whoever was behind Saints Row the Third. I'm thinking about it now. That was a masterpiece. It makes me want to go play it again. I played that game so many times, bro. But shout out to everybody that was behind it.
Year, it had sold more than 1 million copies. Volition had the start of a real franchise.
Yeah, that was the one I regret. I never played the first one. I played the second, third, and fourth.
THQ and Volition knew that they had to be very intentional with their next moves regarding the series. They needed to turn their smash hit into an empire that could truly challenge Grand Theft Auto. And at least in the early stages, they would do exactly this. Within 2 years, Volition followed up with a solid sequel. Saints Row 2 was built directly on the foundation that was established by the original. The story is set a few years after the first game and keeps the core characters and off-the-wall humor and action and expands on it. And because of this, Saints Row 2 is the most beloved game of the entire franchise. They really knocked
I believe that.
Park. So of course,
everybody knows plays Saints Row likes the second one better than the third one. I love the third one.
To a new city and leans even more into the humor of previous games.
Wait, what?
Saints Row 3 feels out of the park. So of course, they followed this up with Saints Row 3. The third game in the series takes us to a new city and leans even more into the humor of previous games. Saints Row 3 feels like a massive amusement park entirely focused on allowing the player to have a good time. And it was just literally a fun good time. And this is also the title where the franchise finally left Grand Theft Auto's shadow and established itself as its own unique IP. And part of this reason is because they continue to drift further away from the serious tones in the previous two games games and focus more on outlandish, wild, and edgy humor. And as you probably know, this is what Saints Row became known for. To give you a glimpse into the edgy and hilarious themes that the Saints Row series leaned into, let's introduce Johnny Gat.
Yep.
This fan-favorite character is a deadpan, edgy sociopath who always shoots first and never asks questions at all, cares nothing about civilian collateral damage, and is extremely self-obsessed. He says things that he shouldn't say, does things that he shouldn't do, and his edginess is why fans loved him. Fans also loved the insane array of hilarious weapons like the Shark-O-Matic, which shoots shark guts at enemies, the Apocalypse, which are comically large fists that splatter civilians.
I gotta play it again, bro. Saints Row the Third.
The character customization, the vehicles, the combat, everything about Saints Row 3 was extremely unique, and it all had a lot of charm.
It worked.
Volition used this quirky humor as a key differentiating factor to play Saints Row over Grand Theft Auto. And this is a big part of what helped it to excel as a franchise.
Yes.
The Saints Row series had climbed to the top and amassed support from fans and critics fairly quickly. But could this momentum last forever? Volition was in the process of developing an expansion for Saints Row 3 called Enter the Dominatrix. But as work was being done on this new spin-off, THQ, Volition's publisher, went bankrupt. This was bad, and it meant that funding for the new expansion and all future Saints Row projects was on hold. This could have very easily been the singular moment that killed Saints Row, but Deep Silver saved the day. The publisher Deep Silver won the bidding for both Saints Row and Volition, meaning that they took full ownership of the entire studio and would publish future Saints Row games. This was great news for Volition because it likely saved the entire franchise from being cancelled altogether. They now had the backing and financial support to continue to work on the series, and that little Saints Row 3 expansion project now had the potential to be turned into something larger, a full game. And with Deep Silver being known for publishing other outlandish titles like Dead Island,
I forgot about that.
Much more comfortable than THQ with the increasingly quirky and bizarre direction that Saints Row was going in. It was the perfect partner for Volition, and Saints Row 4 was on the horizon. In 2013,
which was a lot of fun.
Instead of the usual
fun
semi-grounded gang battles, the protagonist in this game somehow developed superpowers, became the president, and needed to fend off an invading alien race. It was by far the funniest and strangest game yet, and it seemed like Volition and many of its fans had fully embraced this new identity. The game was great. Well, for most. Despite the positive reviews, the release of the sequel was a mixed bag. Some fans felt that it had gone completely off the rails and lost itself. As much as the early games didn't take themselves too seriously, they still had respect for the characters and the narrative that they were spinning. Abandoning the core tension of grounded gang wars seemed like a misstep to
This goes back to what I said. If you're going to do something a little new, it has to work. And for the most part, it did. But was that a risk? Doing that from doing what Saints Row 1, 2, and 3 did to go to a superhero route with 4? Yes. But it worked. That's the difference. That's why I'm making it clear. I'm not saying doing something new is not a bad thing. But as long as you're respectable to the fan base and understand as well that sometimes doing something new might not work and you could lose. You have to understand that. That's just part of the game here. You know, in their favor, this worked. In their favor, this worked. They still respected the fan base when it came to its characters and the tone it was setting outside of the alien stuff. It still felt like he was playing Saints Row. It still felt like it. It was still funny. Like he even said, I think he said it was the funniest one of them all. It was still funny. It landed. So yes, the only thing people was talking about, like he just said, was it felt like they was really shifting off somewhere else. And I know I had friends that said the same thing, but once they played it or watched me play it, they was like, this is good. This is fun. They was laughing. So this one worked. This is an example of if you want to try something new,
and ironically,
make sure it works.
Deep Silver would later attempt to do this. And like I said, as we all know, And these fans lost itself. As much as the early games didn't take themselves too seriously, they still had respect for the characters and the narrative that they were spinning. Abandoning the core tension of grounded gang wars seemed like a misstep to a lot of people. Many fans wanted the game to go back to its roots. And ironically, Deep Silver would later attempt to do this. And like I said, as we all know, it failed. And these fans were even more disappointed when, in 2015, Volition developed another Saints Row game called Gat Out of Hell. This was again supposed to be an expansion, but somehow turned into yet another entirely new game. And, well, the reception wasn't great. Fans of the original grounded Saints Row style hated this even more than Saints Row 4, and people who actually enjoyed the new style thought it should have just been a DLC for the previous game.
Yeah.
Across the board, Gat Out of Hell was widely regarded as something that simply shouldn't have been made, and
it was
coming
okay.
out only 2 years after Saints Row 4, fans were getting a bit worried that Deep Silver was going to milk and potentially ruin this franchise.
Yeah, it was alright.
And oh boy, were they right. Now, real quick, I was going to dive into the disastrous launch of Agents of Mayhem, which was set in the Saints Row universe and was supposed to be some kind of
That game was
spin-off,
rough.
but the
That was
story of
rough.
This game could be an entire video, so let me know in the comments if that's something.
I'm talking about the backlash. That game was rough. It wasn't as bad in my opinion. Agents of Mayhem, it wasn't great, but it wasn't as bad as people was making it.
Underwhelming and disappointing. This, combined with the uninspired and pointless release of Gat Out of
But yeah,
Hell,
when you get a
really
reaction
fans
of this
lose the
one, this
series, and
DLC,
people had
Gat Out of
genuine
Hell,
concerns
you
that
gotta
Deep Silver
come
was
strong
going
with the
to
next game,
absolutely
and Agents
kill
of
the
Mayhem
Saints Row
wasn't that.
franchise. If the series were to survive, they would need something amazing. And it sucks when a developer ruins a game franchise. These days, we don't even own our games anymore, and if a developer or a platform like Steam decided that they wanted to remove your game from your account, they have the ability to do that. In fact,
Which is
most
why
games these
you
days
should get
have
physical
DRM,
copies.
which
That's
basically
why I'm
means that
always
the
for the
games you
physical
buy
copy.
aren't really yours. You can use them as long as the developer allows it, but you don't.
I
own
hate
it.
that.
And
That's why
this
I'm
is
not for
something
this
that I'm
digital only
extremely
thing. That's
passionate
ridiculous.
about.
I paid money
I
for you
feel
to
like
get rid of
gamers
it?
should
No.
actually- So after 4 years of near silence, Deep Silver would announce the newest title in the Saints Row series at Gamescom 2021. Interestingly, the
That
new
is
game was
not
a
how you do it
complete
after
reboot
being
of the
gone for a while.
franchise rather than a direct
And I was the one, I
because of
will
the
admit,
absurdity
I
of
was
the
being
last full
defensive of this
release
game.
and the even more absurd expansions, the devs believed that they had written themselves into a corner. As stated by Jim Boone, the chief creative officer at Volition, even though we love the mechanics with all the superpowers, there isn't a whole lot of runway to go past that. It's why it was a pretty easy decision to go back to our roots and do something that was more contemporary. This reboot was supposed to do exactly that, take the series back to its roots and give it a fresh start and the chance to recapture new and old fans alike. It's easy to make a case for why this was a good idea. I mean, Saints Row 4 was nearly 8 years old, and gaming had come a long way in that time. Although the franchise's sequels had innovated in numerous small ways, each game still relied on the same basic formula that was now almost 2 decades old. The reality is that many fans were calling for the series to end by the 3rd game, and even more thought it should have stopped at the 4th game. People had liked Saints
Which I would have
Row,
been
but
happy
they were
with
beginning
that.
to feel like the series was just getting milked for money. The devs needed to prove that they actually had interesting ideas for those sequels and that they were
I was
more
so
than just a
excited for this
cash
last
grab.
one,
And
too.
although there were certainly benefits to a reboot, there were also a lot of downsides. Reboots have gotten a pretty bad reputation in recent years. Fans are tired of childhood favorites being puppeted by cynical companies looking to profit off nostalgia. And that was part of the reason why fans reacted harshly when they realized that none of the old characters were returning for this game. Instead, we were getting an entirely new cast and story. And the writing changes weren't just limited to new characters, but a complete tone shift. The edgy
And that's the thing. First off, when you remove something so loved, like that's why I said earlier, the characters you had in Saints Row the Third, everyone was enjoyable. When you remove that for entirely new cast, you got to come with it, with their chemistry, everything, or it's going to fail. It's more than just pulling out a gun and start shooting. You know, it's way more than that. The character, the attitude, everything that came with Saints Row the Third and on, it worked. So that's another thing. I just could not. I couldn't finish that last game. It was annoying. The characters were annoying together. So some gameplay did remind me of Saints Row the Third, but like I said, it's more than just that. So yeah, when you make a whole turn and new characters, that's fine. Just do it right. That's the problem.
turning for this game. Instead, we were getting an entirely new cast and story. And the writing changes weren't just limited to new characters, but a complete tone shift. The edgy humor that had made people fall in love with the franchise was gone.
Yeah.
Instead, the devs had attempted to shift to a writing style that was meant to appeal to younger audiences.
Yeah, and I never understood that. I never understood that. Saints Row is not. It is crazy to say that and still make the game mature rated. That still didn't make sense. We're gonna appease the younger crowd, but it's still mature rated. And a little bit I did play, I would not let your kids play it.
Because the writers completely dropped the ball.
Yes.
Every word of dialogue in Saints Row 2022 comes off as trite and cringy. A game
Very.
series that was known for its unique humor was suddenly dropping awful lines like this.
Get the away from my friends.
Saints Row's main characters had always been parodies of the traditional gangster. By contrast, the new series was trying to replace them with a squad of scrawny millennials who were actually trying to be cool, and just weren't. I mean,
it just
take a
didn't
look
work.
at the comments on the reveal trailer. The reboot was supposed to be a return to the series' roots, yet Saints Row had never felt less like Saints Row. Right off the back, the game was met with a ton of hate from fans. Trailers are supposed to be an opportunity for
Yeah, that
companies to
trailer,
put
that
their
first one that
best
came
foot
out, it
forward
had
and
so much
generate hype.
backlash, bro.
And somehow,
I was trying to
this
keep a
trailer
good
had
head.
actively pushed people away from buying the game, and things were only going to get worse.
Yeah.
Almost right after the announcement of the reboot, it was revealed that Mike Watson, aka Idle Ninja, had passed away. Watson had been one of the most influential
I didn't know
modders
that.
in the Saints Row community. He was responsible not just for some of the best mods in the community, but also for working on an official patch for Saints Row 2 to fix
Oh,
many
wow,
of the
I did
issues
not
with the
know
PC
that.
port. Watson had been battling cancer for a while, but that hadn't stopped him from pouring his heart and soul into the community. And some fans
Rest in
felt that
peace.
the reboot was a slap in the face.
God
to
bless his family
legacy.
and friends.
Others
That's
felt that
tough.
the studio should be dedicating more
Forget the
resources
games. You
to
just
finish
lost
the
somebody
patch
special.
that Watson had been working on before his death to ensure that the project was finally completed. Regardless of the quality of the Saints Row revamp, it's undeniable that many at Volition cared for Watson and were genuinely devastated by his passing. A lot of the insults and digs that fans took at grieving employees were legitimately uncalled for. However, it was also a representation of just how much Saints Row fans had turned.
But that's what I
against
said though
Volition.
too. I said to give the company of the latest one a break. They didn't deserve as much backlash. It was a lot. This game, especially on release day, oh my goodness, nobody gave, from what I saw, Saints Row a chance. Now, in fairness, I didn't. I didn't care for the game either, but I was more silent. Someone said I was high because I was promoting the game so much that when the game came out bad, they thought I was high. No, I just didn't want to join the wagon of hate train. You see me now talking about it years later. What was it, 2 years? 2 years later, I'm now talking about it because the fire definitely is going down. So, but yeah, they got a lot of hate, and I'm never, ever with death threats. I don't care how bad. Like, Star Wars has been on a terrible train lately, especially with this new one, Acolyte. I can't even watch no more, but that's how I do. I just don't watch the show. I don't watch it. I'm never going to be that person that agrees with, I don't know the girl's name from Acolyte, but she get like hate mail, death threats and all that stuff. It's never that serious. I'm just one to just not watch it. You're not going to get any viewership from me. I think that's enough. Well, it is enough. You know, death threats is never, no, ever.
In many ways, Mike acted as a bridge between the company and fans. His loss ensured that the divide between them was only going to grow wider.
Wow, I did not know he passed.
And Volition was facing a fan base that was more against them than they had ever been before. But it was too late to cancel the game or make any big changes. All they could do now was release it and pray that the full experience was a lot better than the trailer led people to believe. Saints Row was released on August 23rd, 2022.
Yeah, almost 2
with
years.
all the grace of a car crash. Somehow the game was even worse than players thought. Even critics who usually give everything positive reviews were trashing the game. It was buggy to the point of being unplayable. The graphics were dated and lifeless. And it wasn't just the graphics that felt old, but the entire design of the game itself. In an attempt to go back to its roots, Saints Row somehow only succeeded in bringing back outdated design choices that modern games have avoided for years. The game is packed full of repetitive side missions that are tedious more than anything else. Practically every side quest boiled down to stealing something or shooting someone. There are annoying stealth sections, which, as we all know, people hate. The AI for enemies is incredibly stupid, and you can't even interact with most of the world. There are bicycles you can't ride, casinos you can't enter, and much more. In the modern era, where open world games like Red Dead Redemption 2 and Breath of the Wild have become the standard, Saints Row 2022 was laughably outclassed. But the real disaster with the new release was the absolutely atrocious writing and corporatized lifeless characters in the story. All the raunchy and edgy jokes of past games were actively sanitized to the point in which nobody really understood who it appealed to. The game's characters came off as sitcom teenagers rather than hardened gangsters. There was no depth to these characters and no attempt to get us to like them. They were all basically archetypes.
I didn't care for either one, either person.
Spout quirky one-liners that weren't even funny, and
You
could
didn't
feel
believe in the
Volition's
chemistry.
Desperation to be hip with the kids oozing through the screen. But more importantly, the game didn't have anything to say. There could have been real comedy in this setup. You have a bunch of loser, privileged teenagers acting as wannabe gangsters. If Volition leaned into this, there maybe could have been potential for a lot of actually good jokes, and something like this would be somewhat different from the past Saints Row sequels. But that wasn't what happened. Volition made their cast boring and tried to toss in every buzzword they could justify, and it came off as a painfully corporate attempt to seem modern. And the poor writing.
And that's the problem, man. That's the thing. It's not just Saints Row, but you start to see it die off a little bit now. But in the last few years, they try to, not just games, TV shows, movies, try to fit this modern style attitude of how people are. I call it the Twitter act, because it's not even how people are. A lot of these movies, games. Let me correct what I said. A lot of these games, movies, and TV shows are trying to copy this Twitter attitude. And I don't know if these game companies and movies and whatever these entertainment companies, I don't know if they know this, but a lot of us don't care for that attitude. A lot of us don't. That's why a lot of us don't really live on Twitter. The Twitter mind attitude, for not everybody, but when you hear the word Twitter, a lot of people are rolling their eyes. And it seems like companies, and this was a big example, always try to follow that attitude, that mindset of stuff. And it was like, no, we try to get away from it. We don't care for that attitude. And it seemed like them and some other companies kept trying to adapt it, and it never worked. I haven't found one that worked in this Twitter attitude. I always call it, because it's a big definition. I don't feel like going through it right now, but people know what I mean when I say Twitter attitude. It's not that the app is bad. It's the kind of surrounding that a lot of people are in that app. I'll just leave it at that. But yeah, and when you try to do that, a lot of us don't care for that. A lot of us don't. I don't know what it is. They think that works. That doesn't.
Could have been forgiven if the game at least made you laugh.
Let me go back. But movies, TV shows try to do it. It doesn't work. It's cringy as heck. It's not funny.
But that wasn't what happened. Volition made their cast boring and tried to toss in every buzzword they could justify, and it came off as a painfully corporate attempt to seem modern. And the poor writing poisoned the rest of the game.
Yeah.
Some of the other design choices could have been forgiven if the game at least made you laugh, but
yeah,
it didn't. So in the end, we were left with a game with dated mechanics, terrible writing, and so many bugs that it was practically unplayable. It should be obvious how Saints Row became one of the worst reviewed games of 2022. It was undefendable. Saints Row was a disaster.
I tried to defend it. I couldn't. Once the game fully released and I got a touch of it myself, I was like, nah, I couldn't do it. I'll be lying, and I don't lie.
Saints Row was a disaster from a corporate perspective as well. Volition's parent company, Embracer Group, immediately entered panic mode. The CEO released statements expressing their shock and disappointment at the game's reception.
They're shocked.
Crazy because they should have seen this coming.
Right, they're shocked? Really?
Horrible spot too, because Volition had burned so much goodwill from the fan base that it was unclear if they could ever even bounce back.
Hey, correct me if I'm wrong. Didn't someone in the higher ups of Volition told the fan base to deal with it, or something to that nature? Wasn't this the game? And I believe it's kind of like the attitude, I believe what it was with Battlefield 2042, and then that game started to really take it. They started to be nice, you know. I think it was Battlefield 2042. Saints Row, I believe, did the same thing. They came out, and instead of listening to the fans, the ones that are respectable, I should say, not the one with death threats, I believe they had an attitude of deal with it. And it's kind of hard to say that to people who actually put money in your pockets. You're putting all this faith in this game, this new style, and then you're telling the people who you want to buy the game to deal with it. I could be wrong. It might not be them, but I'm pretty sure. Like I said, it's been like almost 2 years, so some things I forgot. But I believe that's how it was. And this goes for any other company. Like, I heard that the people who was in charge of the Acolyte show was disrespecting the fans, calling them, I forgot. It's basically, don't disrespect your fan base. If you want to disagree with them, but don't go at them. Those are the people that's giving you a paycheck. You know, you don't have to agree with them. You don't even have to change what they want. But don't disrespect. Don't be saying certain things that could cause even more backlash, because you're not going to win that battle. The fans is always going to win that part, you know. So I don't know why companies like the people behind Star Wars and, you know, other games and stuff want to disrespect the fan base. Just ignore them. If anything, just ignore them. You know, you shouldn't. You probably, I mean, it's not a good move, but at least you're not sitting up there vocalizing disrespect. But that's just me.
Fans had already sworn off the series for good, and another sequel wasn't going to fix that. And all of these factors led Embracer to make a pretty tragic decision. They shut down Volition. The studio was merged into a subsidiary company of Gearbox Entertainment, who was just acquired by Take-Two Interactive. So now, there are so many levels in the structure that Volition is pretty much irrelevant in the grand scheme series for good, and another sequel wasn't going to fix that. And all of these factors led Embracer to make a pretty tragic decision. They shut down Volition. The studio was merged into a subsidiary company of Gearbox Entertainment, who was just acquired by Take-Two Interactive. So now, there are so many levels in the structure that Volition is pretty much irrelevant in the grand scheme of things, and that, at least for the foreseeable future, there is little to no hope of Saints Row coming back and redeeming itself. And there's something kind of sad about that, but a lot of people may look at it as a good thing. So is Saints Row dead for good? Maybe. The rights to the game still belong to Deep Silver. They may choose to bring the series back, but it's more likely that the game is finally laid to rest, especially since they no longer own Volition, and they only own the rights to the IP. Honestly, the whole reason that any of this happened is because Deep Silver's insistence on milking the franchise for all it had. And because of this, perhaps it's for the best that the game is finally done for good. Would you guys want another Saints Row, or do you think that the series is a lost cause?
Alright, shout out to Robocast. I'll put the original video in the description. But, oh, wait, let me make sure I like his video. I personally, especially, I hate when a company that I love ends on a bad note. I would love for them, whoever's in charge, to bring back, even if another company has to come in and, you know, offer their, I don't know how you would do it behind the scenes there, but I would love another Saints Row game that's done right. Bring the original cast back. Bring them back. Get really good writers, not this Twitter user writers. Don't do that. Like, stop. Don't do that. It didn't work. It didn't work. I hope they learn that. Them with these TV shows and movies, whatever. It don't work. Stop being stubborn. Look at the result. It didn't work. You know, Saints Row is already known for what it is. Don't try to change that. You tried. It failed. I hope they do it one more time and do it right. I will be there to support it if it looks like it's done right. And if that's their last one, I'm good with that. I'd rather it be their last one and it ended well. I hate how it's their last one and it's terrible. I hate that, but that's their fault. You know, the fans was trying to tell them that first trailer, they should have saw it and delayed that game for a while and fixed it. But no, when you're stubborn, you got to take, whatever comes with that. So, yeah, let me know what you think about it. But, yeah, it's unfortunate because I love Saints Row the 3rd. I might actually play it again one day, pretty soon. But, yeah, Saints Row the 3rd, Gears 3, BioShock Infinite. Those games, Mass Effect 3, all have a special place in my heart. And so those were the games that introduced me to the franchise. I didn't play the old ones first. I played those titles that I said, which then led me to look at the other ones. But yeah, anyway, let me know what y'all think. I'll talk to y'all later. See ya.